Gran Turismo has yet again kicked up some YouTube algorithm dust, and out has come the MP4/4. And I don't exactly know why. It's not the most successful F1 car. That's the Ferrari 312T that I made a video on a while ago. Links are in the description. Though that's only if you count successes by the quantity of successes that a vehicle has had. 27 wins compared to the McLaren's only 15 wins? But if you count it as a percentage, then the McLaren comes out on top. Ferrari's only 30% victory compared to McLaren's 93%? Ooh, that still loses out to the Brabham BT46B, which comes with a 100% win victory. Technically, I also did a video on that one, link in the description. You may say that the BT46B was only a variant, but by that yardstick, the MP4/4 is really only just an iteration or variant of its previous namesakes. The only thing that makes this car that special is who used it to get to their first ever world championship. Ayrton Senna. Often talked about, you can tell that the other drivers that went against him are treading on eggshells because he is widely loved and regarded as one of the greatest drivers of all times, and also one of the dirtiest aggressive dive bombers of all time. Still, I made this absolutely beastly and still very dominating car, driven by one of the fastest drivers to have ever existed, especially in the rain, in Blender. Now available to you to use from the Automation Workshop. Oh, this is actually a really cool looking car. I will grant it that. It's a bit bland, but it does look really cool. Mostly it's the paint job, and we will get to that in a second though. One of the special things about this is it uses the carbon fiber monocoque, which they had used previously a few times. The second Formula 1 car to ever use it for its chassis. Its mid-mounted engine was Honda's power plant, the RA16E, which is a very tiny little V6. The limitations at the time were that it had to be 1.5 liters. And thank God, unlike that old Renault RS01 that I made, this one's stroke is actually obtainable. We have a bore of 79 millimeters, right about there, and then a stroke of only 50.8. Now, we can't actually reach that as it stands. As you can see, it's now dropping the bore side. So we're gonna put this as low as possible and then move this one up to 79. Then over here, after the forged stuff, we'll drop this down to 50.8. Very, very close there. If you remember that old Renault, oh god, that thing was way off the charts of like disparity between the two. Anyway, moving along, we have a compression ratio of, wait, hold on, 9.4 to 1. Oh, that's going to be hard to stick to, but we'll give it a try. Variable valve timing? Maybe. That does look like it has some sort of trickery going on in there. It might actually have it on both sides, but it's hard to tell. And having a look here, even though this looks like a mechanical injection sort of fixture, it's got electrical wiring there, so I'm gonna guess that this is multi-point. So let's move across. We got turbos, 2 turbos. It'll be journal bearing for this sort of time period, and maximum quality. Probably also no intercooler, some injection, multi-point injection. That looks like a single plenum, but it looks like it's got 2 throttle bodies, or does it just go off to one side? It's a bit hard to tell. So single and, oh, what do we do here? High? Mid? Race? You know what? Yeah, I think race will probably be our best bet anyway. If we go twin throttle body, you can see here that it does a weird thing like this. So we are going to keep it single because it's a single plenum, but it might be 2 throttle bodies by the looks of it. Why doesn't Automation have provisions for every single thing that has ever happened in cars since the dawn of time? Let's move on. Probably lots of fuel in here. It's probably tubular. If I'm going to be honest, it looks like tubular or cross with a little bit of cast. It's probably some sort of like stovepipe sort of thing, to be honest, like really thick cast iron or steel or something, and then they polished it up for this. Also, that looks TIG welded. Anyway, moving along, we have a fairly gutless engine. This is gonna take a lot of tuning. We're also probably gonna go with some sort of leaded avgas, or we could potentially go with some sort of ethanol. Since this was the 80s, ethanol did hit the field around now, but really only the difference is about 20 RON. It'll be helpful, but not absolutely divisive, whatever the word is. Now we gotta work with the new turbo explodo mechanics, which is gonna be quite tricky. We do know that these things turbo lag tremendously. The number we're looking for, though this is only the racing trim and not the qualification trim, is about 504 kilowatts, as high up in the rev range as possible. I don't like my chances. We've gotten quite close at 504 kilowatts at 12,500 RPM. Kind of close, and also it kind of explodes. Oh. Ooh. I think we've done it. The turbo explodes right at our RPM sort of limit at 509 kilowatts. Now just to check the torque. About 405 Newton meters. Oh, we're off, but I think it'll have to do. Okay, done a little bit of tweaking, and I think we got a little bit closer now. We're only a few short on kilowatts, but our torque is a little bit over, so I think it's a fair trade-off. I do have a little bit of a plan. I'll try it out later, and I'll let you know whether that works. As for the engine, generic black, I suppose, and generic black engine block. Since it is cast iron, luckily we can paint it. Block, black, valve cover, basic 80s? No. Double overcam basics, there we go. Now we make that black. Nice. And even though it's meant to be 80 degrees, I think that's a fairly good representation. What does it sound like? About what you'd expect. Automation sort of engine sound. Like nothing, a little bit, and then boom! Just an explosion of power right towards the top there. Oh boy, that was loud. Okay, let's go on. We're first gonna make the chassis invisible and look upon our beastie. As for the paint jobs, we can paint this now, just the generic white color. And then we have secondary paint colors. Very snazzy looking. And then for the front bumper, it's these little air podlets here. So we're going to make these their own grill material. There we go, found that. Finally. You also then have like this lower trim area, the interior trim area, and then this trim on the back here, which you can make invisible, which I am about to make invisible as well, because that was open on the actual car. Mwah. Perfect. Rear wheel drive, manual gearbox, something like a 5-speed, I think. Probably an open differential, though it's really hard to tell. Luckily, we've got good numbers here, so about 290s, fairly easy to do. And then 420s. We can't get that high. Now, this is a bit of a misdirect. As we found out recently with automation, the tire width is actually the wheel width here. So they're not exactly 100% spot on. As for now, we're just going to go with some good old vented brakes. Doesn't really particularly matter. A sports under tray, even though I'd like a race one, we just don't have that option yet. Keeping things as light as possible. And then a very standard sort of suspension. Unfortunately, our brakes suffer from brake fade, and we are way overweight by about... where's the weight is in here somewhere. Yeah. 540, about 100 kilograms. Ugh. But unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot we can do about that. Looking at this, though, this is a very brutal, like, we change after first gear, and we're down to 129 kilowatts, which is probably somewhere around, like, 160 horsepower. Not great. Also says our top speed is around 500. Yeah, now we're going to be changing that with some aero. A bit of a simple look here. There's not actually a whole lot to do. We got a front wing, and then a multi-element wing, and then there's a triple element wing on the rear. Luckily, we have some very good mod wing stuff available on the workshop. Good. These wings look like they fit nicely, and the best thing about them is they fit nicely without Parmalat on them. Check out my previous video to get that reference. Now, the front wheel really goes in line with this, and the rear wheel goes in line with this. Unfortunately, that is a major, disruption to what we got here. Really, our only option is to make the chassis narrower, and then to offset this one. But we're gonna have a problem. We've got this now kinda nicely tucked in here, but the fronts we now have to make offset. Unfortunately, doesn't offset the suspension with it, which is really, really poopy bumholes. Luckily, we have some extra things we can do here. Wait, I just did some measuring. This is of the wheel width itself. And it says the wheel itself is nearly 420. But this should actually be somewhere around 390. If we have a look at maybe a tread width here, maybe somewhere around here to about here, 390. Yeah, okay. Although I should be looking at section width specifically. Yeah, you know what? Actually, that is about 390. But yeah, this has to be much wider now. We're going to widen this out to, what was it, 460 approximately? That actually looks pretty darn good right now. We are going to do custom suspension though on the front. This engine though, however, is a bit of an eyesore. So we're going to drop its position down a bit and then move it considerably forwards. I wonder if there's a McLaren MP4 blueprint that has like some sort of cutaway. Though potentially not exactly 100% accurate, it's a pretty good rule of thumb. Seems that the front engine has a gap between it and the rear tire. Looking at other images, yeah, it looks about the same. And here it looks about the same as well. Let's paint this rear section visible and get this lined up. Somewhere about there? Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then repaint it. Nice. Now I suppose... Oh, we got ride height issues now. Oh dear. Is it lurching up on the front more than the rear? Is that... Am I seeing things? It looks like it's got a rake to it. Weird. If we have a look at some blueprints, there is a very minimal gap. And the way that the front is the front will be almost touching the ground compared to the rear. So, I'm noticing that the front and rear tires are different. And unfortunately, we don't have tire other dimensions. We only have the width and the wheel size sort of things. We'll probably figure this out. If it's about 650 in the rear, we got that correct. Let's desync that. And then on the front, it's about 600s. That shouldn't be too hard to do. There, now it looks... Actually, you know what? It looks a lot more level now. Let's just go ahead and change the body Z offset. And what we're looking for is to get this here to be a lot more in the middle of the tire. Body Z offset. That looks good right there. And the front is nearly touching. And the rears are, the rest of the body, I should say, is much cleaner. Good. I'm also noticing that the engine is a little bit too wide with the turbos poking out the side there. I wish I could do something about that. Unfortunately, that would require me to have like a turbo shortcast or something. All right, back to do some tuning, I suppose. All right. After lots and lots of tuning, we finally have a power number that's close, good enough. It's actually a little bit more usable as well, I think, but we do have an exhaust now that is not entirely in the way. Yeah. You know what? We should also put the diffuser on the rear as well whilst we're here and looking at it already. We'll go with the GT3 one. It's close. It's not exact, but close enough. Is there actually a different one? I don't think there is. I think that is as good of a diffuser as, yeah, we're gonna get that's close to what we need. Oh, mod lips and diffusers. Okay, let's grab this one. Let's get rid of you. Oh, yeah, that looks perfect. Okay, let's get on to some livery making then. We got some Goodyear. As always, we have close, but the wrong color. And there's just no other option, apparently. Oh, that looks very close. Marlboro, which is illegal to advertise now. So instead, I think we're going to advertise Melbourne, because here in Australia, if I was to put a cigarette thing on a video here, probably could potentially end up with me getting massive fines. Now, I know that it's usually just for TV, but they actually left the wording very vague, that if I was to do any sort of like spokesmanship for cigarettes like this, it could be considered a violation of advertising rules. So we're gonna play it safe. Lots of Melbourne plastered everywhere, but I suppose it's better than milk. Just. And then the itsy bitsiest little wing mirrors, which, they're probably assuming that they're not being overtaken with they're that small. Do we actually have anything like that? I think we do. I think there is actually something very similar to that. And I think it's this. And I think we're done with pretty much all of the design now. Now, some wheels. I don't think we have a 6-spoke like that, but we'll give it a try. You know what? Actually, that is pretty darn close to what we need. How are we doing for aerodynamics right now? Let's have a bit of a fiddle. Now, we should be creating somewhere around, like, I don't know, maybe 600 kilograms of downforce. We could probably knock off a bit of our top speed. We're not going to be reaching it anyway. And then take a little bit off the front. And we're still getting a bit of oversteer. We are going to be moving the engine forward. So that is going to reduce this. I mean, the engine nodes forward. So this isn't going to be such an issue. But about 600 kilograms approximately. I don't know. This is all very much guesswork. Our top speed has come down to 413. We're still nowhere near hitting that. We can change this a little bit later if we need to. But for now, I don't like our chances of being able to hit anything. Like in our top gear, we're only going to be at 165 kilowatts, which is about 200 and maybe 10 horsepower or somewhere around there. It's not going to be able to push very easily. Way too much of a spike. I wonder what markets we have. Do we have any racing market? And it's very, very faint. Oh, they don't like my race car. And I can kind of figure out why that is too. These cars were just incredibly turbo laggy. I wonder what Test Track reckons it'll do. If it does less than 2 minutes, I will be super happy. 150, I will be really, really glad. 158, ooh, you know what? It's modern day hypercar, oh sorry, supercar fast, like top-end sports car, low-end supercar kind of speeds. Can we make it any lighter? I don't think we can. I think we're pretty well stuffed. We are poop out of luck. Now, before we go do some drastic editing to this, let's actually just see how it drives to start with. A little bit jiggly, you know, fairly flat still. It's not the worst thing in the world. Turn-in is nice and sharp. We don't have any sort of oversteer or understeer. It's probably actually going to be a bit of an issue in the future if we move those engine nodes forwards. Because currently, this thing already understeers. Oh, I think we need more front traction. Oh, you know what? Actually, this collision mesh is already probably the best one I've seen so far. That's a very nice, clean collision. Now, I'm not sure if that's because we've got bodies that fill out the mesh algorithm a little bit better, or if the devs have gone ahead and done something here, but this is actually a really nice collision mesh. And if the devs have done stuff, thank you very much. Now, turbo lag. Boom, all right at about 11,000 RPM. Does nothing and then kicks itself in the butthole. I wonder, hold on, let's respawn. Let's bring up torque, and we can see that past the 12,000 RPM mark, it actually stays fairly flat. This is actually meant to have torque for a little bit longer though. So let's cheat a little bit and go for, where's the engine management? Here we go, race engine management. RPM limit, let's increase that to like, maybe 13,000 RPM. What do we get now? Oh, okay, that's actually looking pretty okay. Let's give it a bit of a try to see whether the automatic gear shifting... Okay, yes, automatic gear shifting does actually adjust with this. Very nicely done, automation devs, on that one. I think we'll just go with a little bit of... turn. A little bit of extra front downforce, induce a little bit more oversteer, and I think we'll be really good. Let's actually see how it does around slingshot right now. Oh, our coolant is overheating. We are running into engine overheat problems. Oh no. But we are not getting the promised amounts of oversteer even before we go in and fix some of the issues we're having. We're not getting anywhere near this amount of oversteer, so let's go ahead and give ourselves just a buttload of oversteer. Now, terminal? Yeah, looks like we're now getting terminal. Even still, that doesn't look like enough, so let's increase the front a little bit more. Downforce of top speed is too high. Oh, bugger, but I think we will be fine. Let's go and re-export, and let's see if now we get a little bit more oversteer. What we're hoping for is actually quite a lot of oversteer, and what that will allow us to do is then move the engine forwards, which will reduce the amount of oversteer we get, and should give us a well-balanced car. Right now, we're still actually understeering way more than what I would like. There's not a whole lot that can be done right now. It's feeling quite stable. I almost don't need to move the engine forward, but I really, really want to. Oh, no, oh, okay, no, please, yep, spin around. There you go, okay. Nice. So, it's already overheating. If we go like a stronger internal, ultra heavy duty internals, let's see how that does. I don't think that's fixable here. What we'd have to do is go a larger amount of coolant in the engine or increase the coolant radiation area. Oh, turn. We probably also could go a little bit of extra oil cooling as well. I'll give you a quick rundown on how we plan to deal with that. Right now, as long as the engine doesn't get damaged from the coolant overheating, we'll be fine. But yeah, no, I think this is a major issue. Coolant is overheating. We've only made it to the Cotswolds. Push, push, push. Our red line is actually not so bad now, actually. It's very passable. Turbocharger's overheating. Oh no. Piston rings damaged. Yep, nah. It seems that we have not given ourselves enough extra performance. And the vehicle is quite good and controlled. We don't really need to move the nodes forward, but we will anyway. If you want to look at moving nodes, watch my video on the complexities of making an F1 car. If you're lazy, we actually now have extra settings in here for this. If we go down, you'll eventually find engine offset. I don't like to use this because you have to move like the engine and everything independent. And also I want to share this mod, which then that means that I have to go in and edit files anyway. If you want to also know how I'm about to change the suspension and everything like that visually, also go watch that video on the complexities of making F1 cars. But yeah, we're just gonna skip ahead. And this is the next day. I spent a lot of time creating a lot of things that I really wanted to have different with this car. And I've done a whole bunch of things like cleaned up the collision mesh, I moved the engine forward, which has unfortunately created a little bit more understeer. A new turbo. So I took a default beamng turbo and I modified it to be fitting the curve to a little bit more accurate to what it is. So the big problem was the turbo spike was right at the edge of the rev range, where it actually started to kick in at about 9 to 10,000 RPM. I couldn't find an exact graph of it, but the peak torque happened at 10k RPM, so it's moved around a little bit. It's not the smoothest power band, but I think it's actually done a pretty good job. It is still, though, incredibly laggy when changing gear, so watch this here. We're gonna... There, you can see that when the turbo just absolutely decimates and shifts up. Now, this isn't actually the fastest lap. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an opener on what this car was able to do. And it's quite brutal, but you're gonna see that I make a few mistakes that, like wrong gear, not riding the clutch when I need to, which will help me get into the power band a little bit earlier. Here I stay in third gear, which I really shouldn't have, because like any other car, this one does not, oh wait, I should say, unlike every other Formula 1 car that I've done so far, apart from the other turbo Renault RS01, this one, you can't just throttle in at any power band point in the RPM and just have power push you down. No, you need to be in the right gear. But we already do a pretty good time, which is very competitive on the leaderboard as is. But we tried again. Now, the biggest difference in this one is the fact that I spent a little bit of time learning how to drive with this amount of turbo. And oh my god, it's really surprising. In second and even in third gear, you'll still be getting wheel spin, but you won't entirely fully know it. It's a little bit, because we don't have like a motion rig and we don't have ground of, like a G-forces, lots of stuff. But you can see that we're cutting it very late here in this corner. And then we're going to stay in second gear, cut back, and then just power on. And we're going to lose a little bit of control, but we are able to bring it down here into the first of the downhill chicane section. Burst into second gear just for ever so brief moments. Get that nice and tight in there. And we're going to stay in first gear pretty much this entire time, because switching into the second there is no use. Now, coming into the tunnel area, we're going to try our absolute darndest to put that power down as effectively as possible. A little bit of a lift to make it through the corner in the tunnel. Here is always really tricky, so you have to brake nice and early, because that is just the worst place for braking on the entire map. Now, coming down here, it gets a little bit squirrely, but not too bad. And this time, we're going to stay in second gear. and it may look like we're just bouncing off the rev limiter there, but actually what we were doing is actually still wheel spinning. It's quite crazy. Nice and smooth through here. Keep it in a low gear so we can keep those RPMs high. Switch into second gear. It's always fraught with peril, and then coming around some of the final few corners, and we're gonna lose a little bit of control here going into second as we just bounce off the wall a little bit, and that unsettledness stays with us, and oh god, oh no, the humanity, but we broke our record again. But luckily, nobody actually ever crashed this car, and they did pretty well with it. Well, that is the MP4/4, one of the most iconic Formula 1 cars of all time. If a little bit underwhelming, a lot of the competition for the year was actually not actually there because people were making the switch over to being naturally aspirated since the very next year they were going to be doing that anyway. And a lot of people just wanted to make the jump over early. Not all of the big competitors, but enough that it probably took a lot of pressure off them. I also want to just say that yes, I did end up eventually making an interior, so this version will be going up on the beamng repository eventually. It just takes a little while sometimes for them to get around to approving it, which, sure, why not? I wish for content creators like me, there was maybe like a fast lane, but I don't even think they count me as a content creator because I just don't have the subscriber numbers. So if you want me to get recognized by them as a content creator, please go ahead and subscribe. Like the video if you've also liked it, all that sort of stuff. This is just it's just a very clean car. The collision was clean, the handling was very good out of the box, even with the engine so far back, and I kind of ruined it. Oh, you know what? Hold on, let me bring this car to a stop. You notice that the suspension I made really long to actually match what the suspension is meant to be like. And in here, I also actually made the geometry of the suspension extra long. And that has had some unwanted side effects. I had to go in, I had to remove some caster on the front. On the rear, it was considerably worse. Because these suspension arms were so long now, what ended up happening is the suspension would deform under like heavy acceleration or at top speed or whatnot. So I had to make like the suspension arms extra strong. A lot of weird things that I'd never done before just kind of went into this car. Also, we're right at the cusp now of getting like the lift nose when they really started to fully comprehend how downforce works. They're not quite there yet. Also, this video did jump the gun a little bit. There were other cars I wanted to do first, so I am going to be going back in time for the next videos to do some a little bit earlier ones. And even though I was like kind of poo-pooing a bit on Ayrton Senna, they were incredibly fast in qualifying, and especially in the wet. And I think they really did deserve to win. They had paid their dues definitely, and they did have the pace to really make it work. I just don't get why people make him out to be the best, because I mean, he's good, and it was tragic, very tragic when he died. But yeah, alright, so this car is very different from the one that I drove in my hot lap of Monaco, but give it a try. But for now, I'll catch you all next time. Right now, I'd like to actually also thank my channel members, which includes Ruben and oh boy, the new guy. Thank you, D. Hellerman. I now have 2 full F86 experience members, and that is very much appreciated. For the rest of you, I'll catch you all next time. Goodbye.